Hey, welcome back to Bullpen Sessions. My name is Andy Neary. Each week, I sit down with abundant thinkers who are kicking ass in life. And we deconstruct the formulas they have used to have success in business and in life to help you unpack your life, your business, so you can do the same. So put a smile on, grab a pen and a paper, get ready to take a ton of notes because you, my friend, are about to go on a wild ride. Here we go. Hey, welcome back to the Bullpen Sessions podcast. My name is Andy Neary. I'm excited this week to have Doug Bopst join me. Doug and I are in a mastermind together, and I wanted to share a story with you because it's extremely powerful. Doug is the host of the Adversity Advantage podcast. He is the author of 3 books, From Felony to Fitness to Free, Faith, Family, Fitness, and the Heart of Recovery. Today, Doug is a fitness coach, a fitness trainer, a fitness mentor, but that wasn't always Doug's story. See, it wasn't but 12, 15 years ago, Doug was not a man, a beacon of health. He was anything but. Doug was using illegal drugs. Doug was selling and distributing illegal drugs. And in 2008, that landed his butt in jail. And it was in jail where his story really starts. You see, it was there behind bars. He met his first mentor in his cellmate of all people. So we talk about that, how this gentleman became his mentor, though both of them were behind bars for illegal acts, making a lot of bad decisions in life. And we also talk about how the game of Scrabble and exercise allowed him to become a better version of himself while still in jail, which has driven him today to be on this mission he's on to help people overcome challenges, whether it's limiting beliefs, drug abuse, you name it, to live a life of health, whether it's both mental and physical. And I'm really, really excited to share this story with you. We also talk about how Doug has used his podcast to allow himself to make some amazing connections, not only to have amazing guests on his podcast, but how he has found himself on some of the biggest names in the industry. People like Tom Bilyeu, Dave Hollis, Rich Rolls. He was on Gary Vee's 1:37 p.m. podcast sharing his story. Yes, his story is powerful, but his ability to connect, his ability to be persistent in creating those connections is equally amazing, and I'm excited to bring that with you. So just buckle up. This is going to be a fun episode. Doug's story is powerful. He's going to make you realize we all have limiting beliefs. We have all made bad decisions, but it is never too late to overcome them. And it's never too late to make an amazing impact on this world. So buckle up, grab a notebook, grab a pen, take a lot of notes. This one's going to be fun. Here we go. Let me bring you Doug Bopst.
Shift your mindset.
All right. This is going to be one fun freaking episode. Doug Bopst, welcome to Bullpen Sessions. How are you, man?
Andy, it's great to chat with you on your show. I know we've connected before, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, you and I met each other in the Fast Foundations Mastermind, which we're both currently a part of.
Yep.
And so let's just go let's level set, man. For the people out there listening, going, okay, wait, Doug Bopst, no clue who this man is. Tell us a little bit about your story. Where are you from? What was the early life of Doug Bopst like?
Man, you got like 4 months? No, I'm kidding. I don't know what you may have said in the intro or anything else, but I'll just say that, today I host a podcast called The Adversity Advantage. I've written 3 books. I've been on all kinds of media to share my story. I'm also a personal trainer, which I've been for nearly a decade. But it wasn't long ago that I was using adversity to my complete disadvantage. I mean, as a matter of fact, it got me incarcerated, and being incarcerated would actually, ironically, save my life. I was incarcerated on felony drug charges back in 2008, and fitness saved my life from the depths of addiction when I was in jail. So before I kind of talk about how I went, because I'm sure many of you are imagining, how did this guy, A, what did he do to get in jail? B, how did he get from that moment to where he is today? Let me paint a little bit of a picture for you. So born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, been here my whole life. And growing up, I had just so many different insecurities, trauma, different pain that I battled in some really unhealthy ways. And when I say insecurities and trauma and pain, like what that looked like for me was my parents got divorced when I was 5, right? So when it was a rough divorce, they hardly talked to each other. And we would bounce around from house to house like people do when they're going through a split home where your parents are divorced. The problem was, it wasn't really a problem, but back then, I'm 33 now, so it's been almost 30 years. I was the only kid whose parents weren't together out of my little friend circle when I was a kid. So I was always questioning what's wrong with me. What did I do wrong, and why am I different? And that created a initial layer of insecurity. And then from there, I was in school, and for some reason, I just wasn't gifted athletically. So I loved sports, right? I know you're a former baseball player. I know your passion for baseball, and I'm sure many other sports. I shared that same passion, except I was horrible at sports. Uncoordinated, had no balance, couldn't run, couldn't jump, was weak. And so I was the guy who was always picked last for the sports teams. Was the person who never made the cut and just was sucked at sports. So of course that creates even more insecurities inside of me. And I was also the kid, and I don't know if it was genetics or my environment, where my metabolism just kind of was a lot slower than many kids. And I started to gain weight at a young age. So by the time I'm 10, 11, 12 years old, I'm getting a little pudgy. And I think it was also a combination because I was trying to escape a little bit with the food I was eating. I was eating things like tons of pasta, Pop-Tarts, bacon, sausage, that sort of thing, which honestly wasn't like abnormal for a kid, I guess, at that moment. But for me, I was probably eating it in a little excess because of, whatever stress I was managing at the time. And as I said, I was in school, and I started getting bullied and picked on. And I was told that I looked like I had Down syndrome. I had no luck with girls. I honestly never had a girlfriend in grade school, which is very embarrassing to admit. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with who I am now, that doesn't bother me, but that's just to give you a degree of my level of self-esteem and self-confidence. And the first real moment, or opportunity, I should say, I got to truly escape from my life was through pot. And when I was 14 years old, I was offered a hit off a marijuana pipe, and I felt this monkey come off my back when I first took that hit, Andy. And it wasn't that I enjoyed that hit of pot or that I loved the taste. It was how it made me feel. I was like, all my fears were gone. The fear of, will I ever get married? Will I ever be successful? What will my relationships look like? Will I make money? Will I have purpose? All that stuff was gone by the time I took that hit. I felt completely at peace with who I was. My pain was numb. And so I had to continue to chase that feeling, because I was like, wow, this works. I've never felt comfortable with who I was. I've never been able to sit down and just not worry about my problems. I got to keep chasing this. So as you can imagine, by the way, I also want to say, I never thought that when I started smoking pot that I would end up in jail. Nobody does. Like, if people thought, and if there was a guarantee, it said, hey, listen, if you take a hit off that pot pipe or whatever you're doing, you're guaranteed to go in jail, in X amount of time, you're going to die. It might change the context of the decisions you make, right? And I know people are listening to this, and pot's legal in a lot of places. I get that. For me, pot wasn't the gateway drug that was the issue. It was the gateway trauma and the pain that I was numbing with the pot that was the bigger problem. So I started smoking it every day. I start smoking weed every day, and then I start selling a little bit to support my habit. And that ends up getting in the way of my interpersonal relationships with my family. My mom and I get into some altercations. She ends up kicking me out on my 16th birthday. I go to live with my dad full-time, 100% of the time, where they were splitting custody before. And I had a really bad relationship with my dad growing up as it was. So I felt a deep sense of rejection, neglect. What is wrong with me? Even though I made those choices, but in that moment, I was like, why is this happening to me? I was being the complete victim of my own circumstances. And again, it built more pain and trauma for me to manage. And I think they kind of did it, I think, thinking, he'll find new friends that aren't using drugs, or maybe he'll get his act together. It just gave me more of a reason to now use drugs, because now I had more stuff to deal with. Found new friends that were getting high. Skated my way through high school, barely graduated because all my friends and I did was ride around and get high. And shortly after I graduated high school, there's a few things that happened. Number one, I began selling pot now to make money. So now I'm 17, 18 years old, and I'm now picking up a copious amounts of pot and selling it in quantities to make money. And so I'd be getting like a few pounds a week, making some money. Problem was all my profits were going up my nose because I now had developed a cocaine habit. I started snorting a little bit of coke. I felt this euphoric feeling of being able to be like superior and being able to do things I never thought I could do, and just being like the man and having that huge rush of dopamine that I never really had before, that I felt great. And I needed to keep chasing that great feeling. But what happened is I also struggled with a fair amount of anxiety and depression as a kid, and cocaine and anxiety go about as well together as somebody trying to lose weight and eating pizza every day. It just doesn't work, doesn't add up. So anxiety times 100, panic attacks, I'm just on edge all the time, and I'm selling drugs. So I have all this stuff going on. And plus, part of me in this moment, I'm like 18, 19 years old, is feeling defeated a little bit, because I did have aspirations as a kid. It wasn't like I just was like, you know what, I want to be a drug addict the rest of my life. No one thinks that. No one grows up saying, you know what, I want to be a drug addict the rest of my life. But what happens is life occurs based on our environment we grow up in. Maybe it's culturally, maybe you make some dicey decisions along the way. Something happens to you, and the way you respond, of course, can lead you down that path of addiction if you're not careful, which is what happened to me. So I end up having all these panic attacks. And so instead of making a logical choice, saying, okay, Doug, you're snorting a bunch of coke, you're selling drugs, you're hanging around this crowd, you're eating like shit, let's maybe stop the drugs, change your friends, maybe engage in some more healthy habits, and turn your life around. I was like, nah, I want to keep going down this path. Let's just see where it goes. And at this point, I've buried. I mean, I've lost a couple of my friends, to drinking and driving, car accidents, overdose. I mean, I've buried. At this point, I think in my teens, I went to several funerals of people that I hung out with.
Yeah.
And I mean, as of today, it's been a lot more than that. And 1 minute, man, what really did me in and brought me to my knees was Oxycontin. And a friend of mine offered me a 5 milligram Percocet, and I took it. And that same monkey that came off my back, that came off when I first started smoking weed, because what happens is when you first start smoking, you develop this thing called tolerance. So you need to smoke more to get that same feeling. So I had to keep chasing that numbing feeling to get that same monkey to come off my back. I had to then smoke even more pot. And once I couldn't get high enough, because I was smoking like a quarter ounce of pot a day at one point, there was literally I could not smoke anymore. It was almost like there wasn't enough time in the day. I turned to that Percocet, and then the 5 milligram turned into 10, turned into 20, turned into 40. And it got so bad that I was snorting 300-400 milligrams a day just to support my own habit. Could barely get out of bed, was spending hundreds of dollars a day on my habit. Half my life.
And Doug, therefore, right there, I have to imagine you're also almost forcing yourself to sell more.
Yes, it was. I had to play catch up all the time. I wasn't even making any money. People were like, "Aren't you making money?" And I'm like, "No, I'm spending hundreds of dollars a day on drugs. How am I making any money? I'm eating out all the time. I'm going to strip clubs. Not there's anything wrong. People who do that, I'm not judging anybody who does. But for me, I was spending money to get attention and validation in all the wrong places. Mm-hmm. And like I said, got to the point where I was snorting hundreds of milligrams a day, and my life in itself was spinning way out of control. Even my drug dealing got sloppy. I got burned. I got robbed. I was losing track of things. And one of the things I lost track of was a headlight in my car that I'd been meaning to get fixed for quite a while. All my friends and their parents were like, dude, you're driving around with a busted headlight. You better get that fixed. Everybody knew me as the kid who was selling drugs. And I'm not trying to brag. It's just people knew who I was, because I had been doing it. I had been in the game for quite a while, and they were like, you need to get your headlight fixed. You're going to get arrested. And again, in that moment, when you're an addict and you're in that cycle of addiction, all you care about is, how you're getting drugs, getting the drugs, selling drugs. It's drugs. Mm-hmm. And headlight didn't fit in a drug anywhere. And my biggest setback, became my biggest blessing. And on Cinco de Mayo 2008, I was riding around with a few of my friends to go make a drug deal. I had a half pound of pot in my car, $2,000 in cash, and a cop was running radar because, it's like one of the biggest drinking holidays of the year. Little did I know, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was going to say, when you said Cinco de Mayo, I'm like, yeah, this is not a good day to be doing this.
Yeah. So instead of like playing it cool and just driving by and hoping he would notice, I flashed my high beams at him, thinking that me flashing my high beams would have him look and see like, oh, he's got his headlights on, he's good. But I gave him a reason to pull me over because his cops are like, why is this moron high beaming me? Mm-hmm. Right? Pulls me over.
Not to mention, high beaming is usually your signal to somebody else that there's a cop in the area.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I honestly didn't even think about that. So you just said you're right. You're absolutely right. So.
Okay. So now you're pulled over. Yeah.
Pulled over. As people can imagine, my heart at this point is in the pit of my stomach. I am incredibly scared for my life because I know what's about to happen. I knew it was about to unfold. And I feel like subconsciously I want to get caught because my buddy in the back seat had an open container. They found that. And then he asked me to search the car. And I said, yes. Searches the car, finds everything I thought I was being very cool and hiding everything underneath the spare tire in my trunk, which is what most people do. I mean, I don't know, at least what we would do. He finds everything, goes in the glove box to get my right registration. There's like a wad of cash in there. And arrests me and puts me in the back of his car. And I remember just sitting there in handcuffs, man. And I don't know if anybody here who's listening to this, or maybe yourself, or maybe you have a loved one, I don't know. When you get to a point where you're in a really bad spot in your life and you're kind of imagining you're kind of seeing every poor choice you made kind of comes to a head. And you're like, how did I get here? How was I this kid who was this super sweet kid, as a young adult that had dreams, that was polite in many ways and loved sport? How did he get to now he's in the back of a cop car in handcuffs and the only thing he wants right now is more drugs and a cigarette? How did that happen? And it was a lot of poor decisions, man, that just never got addressed. I think a lot of people, when they make those sort of bad decisions, if they can just stop like 1, 2, 3 decisions in, kind of go a little bit and kind of just change directions and pivot, you can get out of it a lot easier than if you make 50 of them. And then you're like trying to backtrack and you're like lost in the middle of nowhere without a map. And that's where I was. I had no map.
And I think it's important, Doug, right there, if I could stop. I mean, the lesson I want everybody to hear in that is, for you, it was not a week's worth of bad decisions. We're talking years worth of one bad decision after another. And it's so easy, especially since we're doing this interview in 2020, to blame your current circumstance on outside factors. So you could have sat there literally, and people probably would have, in the back of that cop car saying, stupid headlight, if only I had gotten that. No. It was choices. One of which not getting your headlight fixed, but it was a years and years worth of poor choices that led you to sitting in that back seat in that moment.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a ton of bad decisions on my end, and it was just weird. You're sitting there and you're like, how did I get here, right? And I remember the next thing that happened was I got taken to jail, got booked, charged with the felony intent to distribute marijuana. Yes, it was a felony back then. And so it's just weird. It's honestly, it's funny telling the story now. But what's important for me to share in this whole thing is I always looked, and I always say this to anybody who's ever come to me, whether it's a parent, whether it's somebody who's doing drugs themselves, and they're saying, oh, I'm just smoking weed, or I'm like, well, why? Like, what's the point? Like, why are you doing it? Like, how is it helping your life? And I want to say, if somebody's saying, yeah, I'm living an amazing life. I'm successful. I'm happy. My mental health's good. I have good relationships. I'm showing up to work. I have dreams. I'm driven. I'm fulfilled. And I'm smoking a little bit of weed. Like, who am I? I'm not going to tell my job isn't to tell anybody what to or to not do. I'm just sharing my own experience.
Yep.
But what I do know is that if people start doing stuff like that for the wrong reasons, maybe they have that trauma like I had or pain, and they get the same feeling I did, which is a feeling of being able to escape and numb themselves out, you can set yourself up to go down a really dark path if you're not careful, a path that can lead to jail, death, in and out of rehabilitation centers, broken relationships, and go on and on. So I get charged, and a few months later I go to court. And again, you would think after I got charged and arrested and everything else, Doug might be like, and I'm, I don't mean I'm not trying to be important by talking in third person. I'm just saying, just it's a context that like Doug back then would have been like, well, maybe it's time to maybe get your life together and stop doing drugs. But no, again, more pain. Now I'm facing drug charges. I'm facing potentially going to jail. I mean, it's like all these things are just adding up. And so I go to court it was September of 2008, and the judge sentenced me to 5 years. He found me guilty of the felony of intent to distribute marijuana, found me guilty of that. And then sentenced me to 5 years, everything but 90 days, 5 years probation, 200 hours community service, all kinds of fines and drug classes. But he said, Doug, you're young. If you complete everything without messing up, because this felony conviction is going to haunt you the rest of your life. He's like, if you complete everything without messing up, no missed probation appointments, you do your time, you do your community service, you pay your dues, all that stuff, I'll take the felony conviction off your record at the end of the 5 years of probation. And at that point, Andy, I'm 20 years old. I didn't think I was going to live to see my 25th birthday. Like I had said, I'd been to several funerals at this point. I was like, it's 2008. Isn't the world supposed to end in 2012? Remember that whole thing that was going on back then? I was like,
the Mayans, by the way, were 8 years too early because it's happening in 2020.
Yeah, exactly. They missed the mark a little bit. And so I just, you know what? I took the deal, got out, kept getting high, and then reported to jail a few weeks later, ironically, a week after my 21st birthday. And the last thing I did was snorted a few hundred milligrams of oxy. I was like, this is it. And I reported to jail, and I walked into those gates incredibly scared. I was crying. I was incredibly, obviously disappointed in myself, tons of regret, shame, anger. And I was uncertain because, I had these stigmas. I was like, what's going to happen in jail? I don't want to get into, the detailed thoughts, but you can know what I'm talking about. Like what's going to happen to a guy like me who's unathletic, who, wasn't a fighter, was scared, what kind of things would happen. And I detoxed cold turkey in there. And for people who don't know what that feels like, it's like having the worst case of the flu for 3 weeks straight with the level of stuff I was doing. You're vomiting uncontrollably, bowel movements all over the place. You're shaking, sleepless nights. You feel like you're trying to crawl out of your own skin, aches and pains, because you're used to, with the numbing all this pain and pretty much tranquilizing yourself with all these painkillers that you're not, like certain things that used to or normally would hurt somebody or might like certain movements like hurt more now because you're so used to being sedated and tranquilized. And then as I'm like getting through the detox, like, you alluded to before we got into our conversation, was my soon to be cellmate was sitting there at the Scrabble table playing Scrabble. And now playing board games was not really something I did. I played a little bit of chess when I was a kid, but I remember him looking at me and he took some interest in me. He's like, what are you doing here? And I remember sharing my story and I was like, oh, I'm in here for this, I'm here for that. And he just had me kind of sit down and I watched these guys play Scrabble. And I remember him looking at me and was like, you're going to work out with me. You're going to start working out with me. And I was like, dude, are you kidding me? There's no way. Because at the time, man, I could have been a model for Pillsbury. I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now. I was, as unathletic as they come, as I've mentioned a few times. And I had no confidence in me. So me trying to work out and doing something such as doing a push-up or running when I knew I hadn't really done that before in my life in front of a bunch of grown men wasn't something I wanted.
Grown men in jail.
Yeah, it wasn't something I really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then that night, I saw him work out for hours, man, like push-ups, pull-ups, running. And I was like, who is this guy? And so just like anything else, kind of like, it's funny, kind of like any kind of coach, client, trainer, client, we started building some rapport, right? In our cell, sharing more of my story, learning about his story. And what he really had me realize was I had been a victim most of my life, just with blaming people for my problems, blaming my addiction on my parents' divorce, blaming it on the girls that rejected me, blaming it on this, blaming it on that. And he looked at me and he said, there's plenty of people whose parents get divorced. There's plenty of people who experience abuse. There's plenty of people who get picked on or don't get picked for teams, but they don't all end up in jail or addicted to drugs. You did. So that's your stuff. You have to own that. And I'm like, he's right. And I remember him saying, like, if you're going to change, it's going to be up to you. No one's going to do it for you. If you want to change, it has to be you. And I felt empowered in that moment and decided to give exercise a try and got down. I was in the common area of a bunch of grown men, got down to a push-up. Sadly, couldn't do a push-up, not even from my knees. Could barely walk up and down the steps. And we set a goal to do 10 push-ups and run a mile by the time I left my sentence. And with his encouragement and training me in there every single day and holding me accountable, I was able to do it. I was able to run a mile, do a set of 10 push-ups. And I felt this new sense of self-esteem, confidence, dedication, commitment that I never had in my entire life at that time. And it wasn't because of the push-ups and the sit-ups in itself. It was more about how they made me feel. I felt this sense of accomplishment. I felt like I was taking care of myself for the first time, setting and achieving goals. All these things we know today to be important was something that I learned when I was in jail.
Well, and who would have guessed that your first true mentor in life would have been the guy that you shared a prison cell with, right? And
yeah,
I think it's
ironic.
important. One thing I want to add to your story here, because it's a word that popped into my head as you were telling it, momentum. A lot of people think of momentum in a positive sense, right? And that's true, but there can be such a thing as negative momentum.
Yeah.
And when you apply one bad decision after another, that creates that flywheel of negative momentum. And when you told the story of how when you got to jail and you went cold turkey and it was like literally you were crawling out of your skin, it brought a vision to my head of almost like all those years of bad decisions were literally finding their way out of your body.
Yeah.
And it's painful.
You can stack days, man. And I love the importance of stacking your days in a positive way and in a negative way, like you alluded to. So let's just say for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes a day, whatever it is, you're engaging in things like doing drugs, alcohol, social media. I mean, and with all this, it would take more than that. I'm just saying just for a time, just this amount of time, social media, you're playing the blame game, you're getting into arguments with people, you're spending like uncontrollable amounts of money. You do that for 3-4 weeks straight. Think about how much worse your life will be in 3-4 weeks. 3-4 months, where's your life going to look like? 3-4 years, 10 years. By just making poor decisions for less than an hour a day.
Yep.
Right.
I think one of the best things that probably ever happened to you was hitting rock bottom.
Yeah. I don't wish that on anybody. I think there's people that are like, I wish I had your story. I'm like, do you? Like, do you really wish you had my story? Because let me tell you what I had to do. And it wasn't easy. And I had help along the way. I had some great people come into my life. I had I said my cellmate and other people, but it's hard, man. And I think a lot of people don't make it out of rock bottom because they don't have, I don't want to say the courage, because I think everyone's courageous, but they don't have the patience to stand in the storm when it's raining. Everybody wants to put their umbrella up really quick and hide from the rain when it's pouring on you. Mm-hmm. But I think when you can just stand there in that storm and just believe that you're in there to get stronger, that you believe you're in there to get better, and that the rain's going to stop at some point. Mm-hmm. But is it going to stop because you trusted it to stop, or is it going to stop because you tried to force it to stop and you end up making a bad decision, right?
Yeah. And
then so you can also stack days in a positive way. If you were spending let's just say, you're spending an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, which isn't a lot, you're exercising, you're listening to podcasts, you're meditating, you're talking to positive people, you're doing all these things. And over time, you'll stack your days. It's funny. I just had Robin Sharma on my podcast and interviewed him, and he talks a lot about this very things. that he's been saying for years about the routine and how important having a routine in the morning can literally not only change your life, but completely transform it, because you stack these days. And it's just like you talk about, just like I talk about, it's the same kind of thing. Like how you spend your time adds up. And I think a lot of people, they let one bad day turn into 3, 4, 5, and they look back 3, 4, 5 months from now, and they're like, what the hell happened? How did I get from here to there? And it's like, well, you couldn't manage that one day. And so going back to, to finish up my jail story really quick, and then we can get more into the weeds of some habits and that sort of thing that I've developed now, is when I left, so when I went in, I went in crying because I didn't want to go. When I left, I cried because I didn't want to leave. And I walked up to my cellmate, and I just remember saying, hey man, like, how am I ever going to repay you? Like, how can I, it's funny. I think of like that Leanne Rhymes, like, how do I live without you? So,
a very weird song when you're thinking about two cellmates talking, but okay.
Well, I mean, no, I didn't, I remember, I know. You know what I'm getting at. It wasn't like in a way where I was like, I'm going to miss you because we were dating. It was like more.
No, the words, we're talking about the words here.
Like how can I live without you? Yeah. Like, because I had just grown so attached to him in there.
Yep.
That.
But a lot of people say that, don't they, Doug? If they've spent time in jail, there's also that fear of leaving.
Yeah. Because I didn't know how I was going to adjust when I left. Like, I didn't know how I was going to survive and adapt. And that was the thing I was worried about, was how was I going to live without him? Like, because up until that point, my life was spiraling down super fast in a bad way. And then I get to jail, he helps me along. Yep. And then I'm like, all right, like the only thing that's changed is having him in my life. So I need to keep him around. And I just said, how am I ever going to repay you? I definitely obviously got emotional. I cried because I felt like this unexpected angel came into my life and helped save it. And he said, just pay it forward and, don't mess up. And he gave me a workout plan that I still have framed in my place, so I never forget where I came from. Got out, was driven by not letting him down and just not wanting to go back to jail, that I stayed on a workout plan, lost 50 pounds, and then got to a place fitness-wise where I wanted to help other people use fitness to change their lives. And that's why I became a personal trainer, was to help pass the torch on, if you will, and use the same lessons I had learned about the power of fitness to help other people. And was blessed to build a really successful personal training business. This is back in April of 2011 is when I started training. And time flew by, man. And January of 2014, I had completed all the stipulations that the judge had given me. And I'd actually been featured in some media at the time too. I think my story had gotten out a little bit because I was very open about it. And the judge granted me the modification hearing. We went, and he took the felony conviction off my record. Because awesome. I completed all the stipulations. I served the 5 years probation, did the jail time, did the community service, paid my fines, never missed a drug test, stayed clean off the drugs I was abusing. And I never really knew how much life could change in a matter of moments, man. And it did for me in that day. And I took it upon myself to know that I wasn't just here to be a trainer. Like, I love training people and I love helping people, but I think the bigger reason is to share my story, to help other people kind of get through this block and help save people from addiction. And it inspired me to write my first book, From Felony to Fitness to Free. And then I was voted as a fitness hero by the Baltimore Sun in 2015, and just have been on a tear since then. Really wrote 2 more books, Faith, Family, Fitness to Harder Recovery. Have been featured on media outlets such as the Today Show and Men's Health. I've been on, Rich Roll's podcast, Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu. And then I have my own podcast where I've interviewed some incredible people too. And the last thing I'll say is, I don't think a lot of this wouldn't have been done without a few things: being tenacious, like just not giving up on myself, and relationships. And I think those two, I mean, there's plenty of other variables, fitness, everything else, but a lot of the people I've met along the way have been through relationships and developing a better relationship with myself and being tenacious and not giving up. Like, I was able to speak to the Clemson football team with Dabo Sweeney last year and share my story to their team. And that was through a relationship. And it's like, relationships are everything.
Well, let's go there because
Let's go.
there's so many so many things to unpack from that
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
And
I got time.
This is why I love having you on. It's your power of
Yeah.
your story, because it's your story, but what you've done with it that has allowed you to make some great connections with some great human beings.
Yeah.
And going back to your time in prison, what would you say? I mean, the obvious is your mentor showed you what exercise meant and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But really, what were the lessons, the one or two lessons you took away from the mentorship, the time with him that you apply today?
There's a few. I think for one, it's just, you gotta be the hero of your own story. Like no one's going to change or do the work for you. You have to do it, because for the longest time I was waiting for someone to come save me. And when you wait for someone to come save you, you get really lonely because no one's coming to save you. It's a hard truth, man.
Yep.
And to know that if it was going to be, it was literally going to be on me to make those decisions to change my life. And if I got some help along the way, cool, but there's no guarantee that was going to come. So it was more so along the lines that I had to take responsibility for my choices, my actions. And he told me some hard things that I didn't like to hear. He called me, I remember, he was very honest with me about why I couldn't do a push-ups because I was fat. Like that's a truth, but I hated hearing that word. And there's a lot of people that I'm sure don't like that word, but for me, that fueled me. Mm-hmm. That drove me, because I was like, I never want to be called fat again, ever. And I think you have to attach a deep, and I mean deep, emotional why to whatever you're trying to do. And I learned that in jail. Before life attaches that why for you. Like I had every opportunity to attach that deep emotional why before I went to jail. I mean, I'd lost friends. I mean, I hadn't gone to the bathroom for like a month because I was so constipated from doing so much oxy. Like my life was falling apart. Like I should have in real time been like, you know what? Like maybe it's time you change so you don't die.
Yeah. But
life attached the why for me, and I went to jail. And I was fortunate enough to come across a guy, my cellmate, that helped inspire me to get going, to change the way I dealt with my stuff. But then after I got out, what would help me was when I was in jail, I attached a deep, meaningful why to why I wanted to change my life. It was because I didn't want to write my mom another letter like I did. I didn't want to see her cry on the other side of the glass. I didn't want to spend another Christmas behind bars. I didn't want to disappoint people. I didn't want to disappoint myself. There's so many that are deep. Like that's deep, man. Like saying you don't want to be in jail during Christmas is deep.
Yep. And
it's not just about like losing 10 pounds. It's like, no, I don't want to be in jail during the holidays anymore.
And I think it also it's that whole put a frog in water and slowly boil it, doesn't realize it's being boiled. That's kind of what was happening to you, right? And it happens to so many people. One bad decision today, it's not going to be a big deal. A couple bad decisions this week isn't going to be a big deal. But you apply that over and over and over again. You don't even realize how down your life has spiraled until it's too late. Now, fortunately for you, you hit rock bottom. You found a mentor. And I think one thing important with this mentor, and it's so important with any mentor, you didn't like hearing you were fat, but you know what? He told you the truth. Think about our society right now, Doug. How many people sugarcoat shit?
I hate that
because they don't want to hurt feelings. But no. Sometimes you got to tell the truth.
A good coach, I feel like, doesn't tell you what you want to hear. He tells you what you need to hear. He or she tells you what you need to hear, right?
Yep.
And what's the old saying? You can't put lipstick on a pig. Isn't that what they?
Yes. Yep.
And that's like the thing. Like the pig for me was my addiction and my trauma and everything else. Everything else that I was trying to sugarcoat and saying, like all my choices that I made in response to all that, I was trying to sugarcoat and blame other people. And I tell people right now, like a short-term hard truth is better than a long-term lie. And if you're lying, if you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're lying to yourself, again, 2 days, 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 years, over time, that's going to stack up. And sure enough, your perception of what your life actually is so far off. And because you've lied to yourself, you're lying to other people, and you like believe this other life that doesn't even exist because you have just not wanted to take a cold, hard look at yourself and swallow your pride a little bit and be like, you know what, like this truth hurts right now. Maybe I do need to lose some weight. Maybe it was my fault. I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I could do a better job of managing my emotions. Maybe I need to go to therapy. Maybe like whatever it is, that you could stop the bleeding right then and there and say, okay, I'm going to pull the Band-Aid off. It's going to hurt. It's going to be like a 10 pain right now.
Yep.
But that 10 pain over time will become like a 1 or a 2 if you manage it in the right way. It might come up a little bit through here and there with different situations. But what happens to that long-term lie, Andy, is when you fully don't rip the Band-Aid off, and that pain's like a constant 6 or 7 because you're short-term alleviating the pain, but you're, long-term just creating more of a problem in your life. And I will say also that it doesn't mean that you just beat yourself up when things aren't going well. It doesn't mean you just start talking horribly down to yourself. Like, that doesn't make anything any better. As a matter of fact, like I advise people not to do that. I advise people when they're starting to go down that spiral to accept it. Like, it's okay. It means you're a human being. Like, it's going to happen. You're going to have bad days. There's going to be moments where you're depressed. There's going to be moments when you're anxious. There's going to be moments when you're stressed, and you're going to have nights where you don't sleep well. Cool. Like, congratulations. You're a human being. Like, what are you going to do about it? What's the next step going to be? Right.
Yep.
And your approach has to be positive. And I don't mean like that everything in your life is positive. I don't agree with that. I don't think everything in life always is positive. It's not. But what I do believe is that the mindset and the approach you take has to be positive. You have to believe that whatever you're doing, you're going to achieve. You have to believe whatever steps you're taking to lead you in the right direction. You have to believe that if you do certain things on a daily basis, it's going to add up to achieving a bigger goal.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many lessons that come out of your story, Doug. It's, when I think about addiction,
yeah,
it comes in so many forms, but ultimately it leads to unhappiness. It could be addiction to drugs. It could be addiction to porn. It could be addiction to money, right? How many people do we know are constantly chasing that next high because the current win, the place you are in life, is never good enough. I was there with sports and it impacted me in business early on, where I just was never happy because I was always like, that's great, but I'm on to the next goal. I was almost addicted to the next thing. And that can, like I said, that leads to unhappiness and a complete lack of fulfillment. But here's what I love about your story. It's like the first half of your life was all about bad decisions.
Yeah.
The second half now has been about great connections. And I want to talk about that because you've been able, you said it earlier in your in your story, some of the shows you've been on, like, not just anybody gets on these. I'm just going to, for the people listening in, let me read a couple. You were on Tom Bilyeu's Impact Theory, right? Tom Bilyeu's got millions of followers. You were on the 1:37 p.m. podcast, which is tied to Gary Vee. Dave Hollis's Rise Together, Rich Roll's podcast, The Today Show. I mean, your story alone does not get you there.
Yeah.
There has to be, you used the word tenacity earlier. And again, I know there's a lot of sales professionals listening in. How is tenacity applied to your ability to make these great connections in life these days?
Yeah, I'll get to that in just one second, but I first want to kind of say something about a point you alluded to before you asked the question, which is about how you kind of became addicted with your sports, right? And I think so many people, when they hear the word addiction, they think just drugs, alcohol, maybe some might say sex, gambling. Addiction can be social media. Addiction can be to drama, complaining. It could be to food. We know that. Drugs, alcohol, sex, vanity, lying. I mean, there's so many addictions. Like an addiction to me is something that you do that's bad enough that it starts negatively impacting your life, or you're using it. You can't live without it, and it's negatively impacting your life. Like, obviously we can. You can't live without water, but that's a positive impact for your life, So with that being said, going back to your original question, I just had this deep sense of calling between, my faith in God and everything else, that I was meant for more, meant to share my story, to help other people. And the relationships, I think now, like I've just always, just ever since I saw my cellmate take such interest in me, it changes your perception on things when somebody really goes above and beyond and does a big act of service for you, that I just kept investing in the right relationships and kept following my journey and taking risks. And you talk about stacking days. I stacked what's next? Like, what's next, right? So for me, it was like, well, what's next? I just was able to do a set of 10 push-ups when I couldn't do one. What's next? Well, I'm going to run a 5K. What's next? I'm going to bench 135. What's next? I'm going to become a trainer. What's next? I'm going to get the felony off my record. I'm going to write a book. What's next? I'm going to share my story. And what really got the ball rolling for me was a mentor of mine had recommended a publicist at the time. This was years ago. Because I was like, dude, I had been on all the local media. Just my story got around. And I just said, I want to get my story known to go on a national level. I was like, I feel like if I could get my show or my story on something big, it would completely impact so many people and could change my career. And I ended up taking a big risk and spending a bunch of money and hiring a guy that I was really aligned with for PR. And I just said, where I was, and this is before like a lot of the podcasts, it was, I just said, listen, this is my story. I think we're in a unique time right now. There's the opioid epidemic's at an all-time high. People are struggling. I think with my story, it's unique in the sense that I've really found other ways to navigate my pain through positive ways, fitness, my friends, my choices, purpose, which I think there's a lot of correlation between what I did in other recovery programs, but I never went to AA or NA, which is very unique. And so I ended up having a conversation with this guy, and I was like, dude, do you think we have a chance? Like, yeah. And I found out what this guy did, and he had done some incredible things, and he ended up getting me on the Today Show. And Today Show came here for 2 days, spent 2 days with me, and ended up releasing like a 7-minute documentary on my story. And then of course, through this time, I'm building relationships with other people, which then they introduced me to I had different friends that introduced me to other people where I would just say, hey, do you think they would be interested in having me on this show? And I would just ask. They would say yes or no. And you meet people through the personal development space or through the fitness community. And a lot of it, like some of the shows was either through a relationship, like the podcast, and other ones was, I'm just reaching out, being tenacious and not being afraid to get told no.
Yeah. And I think
and what the Today Show, the one thing too, is like being tenacious is important in risk. Like I pulled a lot of money out of a Roth IRA. And it's like a no-no, right? It's like a no-no. But I knew in my gut, I was like, I can't take money to my grave, but I can take take fulfillment in the amount of lives I'm going to change from sharing my story to my grave. And I knew that as an entrepreneur, being somebody who was by myself, I had to invest in myself. When you're working at a corporate job and you're working for somebody else and you have a retirement plan, you have more of a set, stable income where you're going to get certain things. The future's a lot easier to predict. So you can put away more. And at least this is my opinion. I'm not I have people who manage my money and that sort of thing. And I'm not here to say what you should or shouldn't do with yours. But for me, that's what I felt called to do, was do that. And I ended up paying off because now, the Today Show came and did this amazing story on me. Then I ended up getting into men's health on Cheddar, went to VaynerMedia, was on one of their podcasts, met Gary Vee, and then was able to use some of the press that I got to get on some of these other podcasts. And I'd been telling my story for a while. It wasn't like I just started on Impact Theory or I started on some of the other Rich Roll's podcasts. I had been on other shows before that. And I think a lot of people, they see something like that and they see me and they're like, oh, you just got on this. I'm like, no, I've been on plenty of other podcasts before that. Either practicing my story or being like, hey, well, who do you know? Or who do you know? Because the chances are if you have a good story or you have something you want to share and the person likes you, they might introduce you to somebody else. And then it's helped me open up relationships for when I started my podcast, The Adversity Advantage, to be able to get people whose either shows who I've either been on or people that have inspired me along the way through my own journey, and being able to have conversations with people that are connected to my story or that I've been connected to pay it forward and give the audience exposure to some of these amazing people.
Well, that's it, man. And what I want everybody to hear is what has led to the success you have today, hands down, in my opinion, is your ability to share your story and share it far and wide. Now, do you need a story of doing drugs and going to jail? No, you don't.
No,
but
you don't.
Everybody has a story, and no one is going to share it for you.
Yeah.
And I preach this, Doug, to the brokers I coach, is that, listen, that's the one competitive advantage you will always have. No one has your story.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to put the work into sharing it, get it shared, get it seen to make the amazing connections. Because so many people are sitting on the sidelines and they're like, man, how does Doug connect with that guy and that woman? Very simple answer. He asks.
Yeah. And I hustle. And I think for me, it's like, and this is just my vision for everything I'm doing right now, and is to be able to share my stuff or on the biggest platforms I can. And just because I want to impact as many people as I can. And the same thing with people I have on my show. I want people to listen and get some of the best advice, some amazing people, and even stories and tips and tactics, so that, that I can pay it forward, and I'm able to give them the same hope that I got when I was in jail. And it's not easy, but I feel like this is what I'm called to do. I feel like I'm called to share my story. I feel like I'm called to have a podcast. I feel like I'm called to just connect with people, because, it's funny, and I'm not going to get, I don't want to get like crazy spiritual, but I remember when I first became a Christian, I was like, I was like, how do I become a better Christian? Right. Cause I was like, and I remember asking somebody that was a mentor of mine in the Christian community. He just said, like, what are you good at? Like, what do you like to do? And just do that. And that was something that I stuck with me. I was like, wow. And that doesn't matter if you're a Christian, if you're Buddhist, like whatever, like just focus on what you're good at, and just keep doing that. And eventually the right things will happen.
Well, here's what I want to wrap up the episode with. A couple questions.
Yeah.
You have two audiences I want you to speak to right now. For that individual who is down and out, let's face it, 2020 has been a shitty year for a lot of people. And they could be finding themselves making a lot of bad decisions that they're masking as excuses because 2020 sucks. What would be your advice to that person who is just at that point of starting to let the negative momentum turn into one bad decision after another? What would you say to them right now?
Well, I would say, for one, acceptance. Okay. I think the biggest thing, Andy, one of the biggest things that people struggle with is the shame cycle of everything. Like, why am I feeling this way? Is this normal? And I think if people can understand that it's okay to feel that way, and it's actually somewhat normal given the circumstances, it kind of lifts part of that weight off of them. And so once you accept it, like, okay, like what can I do about it? Because you have to understand, the only person that's going to change your state and your situation is yourself. No one's going to pull you up off the couch. I mean, if you're lucky enough, somebody might help you off the couch, but no one's going to pull you completely off the couch.
Yep.
So you have to take that first step. And what's that step look like? And for many, it's just knowing that, they go out for like a 10-minute walk and just start changing their habits and saying, well, what can I do to better my mood right now? What kind of things can I do to get me to feeling better in a healthy way? Right? Because remember, every choice we make corresponds with a following emotion. Like, every choice we make corresponds with a following mood, state of mind. So, just really, I would almost like make a list, being like, okay, like, what are 3 things I can do every single day that I think would help me feel better? Because most people know what to do. Let's be real. Most people know the benefits of exercise. Most people know what to eat. Most people know that they shouldn't be like scrolling up and down on social media. But it's a matter of doing it. Yep. So write down those 3 things, and then just start to slowly figure out how you can do every single one of them. So like I said, maybe if you're somebody who's never exercised before and you want to get out and start moving your body, maybe it starts with a 10-minute walk, 5-6 days a week. Maybe it also, something in there also starts with a 10-15-minute phone call with somebody that you admire or you look up to. Maybe the third thing you do is you write down, 3 to 5 positive things you feel about yourself.
What about that? Now, let me ask you the part 2 question.
Yeah.
This is a different audience. The Doug we know today. Somebody's listening in and says, man, I know I have a story. I know it could impact my business. I could impact my life, but I'm either too afraid to share it. I don't think anybody would be interested. What would you tell that person right now?
If they don't know if their story is important, you mean?
Yeah, they don't know how to share it. They're afraid to share it, but they know the impact it could have literally on their life or their business, or a combination of both. What is the power of story and your story meant to you?
It's everything. I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gotten out and shared my story. I mean, I might have been in a different profession because, being a trainer can be very monotonous, day in, day out, counting sets and reps. It can be very challenging to kind of stick with that. So I could have either changed professions. I could have still been in the same health club. And right now, as we know it, the gym industry is being flipped upside down. Yeah. Right. And so there's so much power in it. And you don't have to have a crazy story. Like everyone's like, you have a crazy story. To me, it's like, yeah, it's my story. So it's not as crazy as some other people might see. But really, here's what I would say. Here's what I tell people that I coach is know your audience. And I'm sure if, they're listening to this or they're being coached by you, Andy, I'm sure they have some sense of who their audience is. And what does the audience need to hear? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, and I think the moment that your audience feels that you understand them, you win. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like, and it's simple. Like there's the old feel, felt, found method with therapy, right? They talk about when you're trying to share your feelings. You can just say, like, I mean, so if my audience, I'm just going to use me as an example, and say my audience is somebody who's addicted to drugs, right? And I just say, hey, I totally understand that right now we're in the midst of hell in our world. There's so much despair, there's so much tension, there's so much uncertainty. And if you're somebody who's addicted to drugs right now and you're falling down that rabbit hole, I understand how you feel, right? I know how you feel. And as a matter of fact, I've been there before, and I felt that way when I was addicted to opiates. But I found that when I didn't address my behaviors or my habits and change the way I managed my stress, anxiety, I found that I was incarcerated on felony drug charges.
Yep.
And I just want to tell you that when I began to take control of my actions and take responsibility and just put one foot in front of the other and focused on small wins and started exercising, hanging out with the right people and having faith in myself, things changed. Simple, right? Took me 2 minutes.
Changed everything. Yep.
And it's like, how can you position yourself to relate to where they are at? Because I think the biggest mistake people make is they try to tell where they are right now and expect somebody to relate to them. If you're somebody in the insurance industry who say you're trying to, like, would you say like the people you're talking to, do they have like people working for them in the insurance business, or they're selling insurance? So
they're selling insurance. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, say your customer, for instance, in the insurance business you're trying to talk to, say that person right now has been, burned in the health insurance space, and maybe they've had a bad experience, or maybe they're just financially not able to buy like high-end insurance, whatever the case may be. I'm just saying that person who's really having trouble right now that you're trying to sell the insurance to, that you're getting a no from, you can simply relate to them and be like, you know what? I understand how you feel. I have been in that situation before. When I was broke and building my book of business, or when I was changing jobs, I could barely afford insurance as it was. But I found that when I did the little things in life, I assessed my budget. I said, where can I cut spending a little bit? Where can I do things that I can take more control of my own health, so that until I can afford my own insurance, I can at least remain healthy? Then what you're doing here, I found that my life improved. I was able to make more money, and I was able to afford insurance. And now what you're doing is, maybe you haven't gotten the sale for them directly right then and there, but you've built a relationship, and you've built rapport, and that's everything.
And letting them know, I'm just like you. I think that's so important, that you have to let your audience know that resonation of, I'm just like you. I'm not above you. I'm not flawless. I have the same struggles and pains you have. That, to me, that person that's able to share that kind of story, it's the sky is the limit as far as how much they can take their business, their life, their relationships. So Doug, let's finish here.
Let's go.
You have a powerful story, man. Thank you for sharing it today.
Yeah.
You've got, 3 books out there, from Felony to Fitness to Free, Faith, Family, and Fitness in the Heart of Recovery. You're the podcast host of the Adversity Advantage. How can people follow you? How can people get in touch with you? What are the most effective ways?
Well, the first thing, I guess, to get more of what I talk about here is listen to the podcast, The Adversity Advantage, which is available wherever podcasts live. And then if you just go to my website, dougbopst.com, you buy my books there. It's got some more of my media stuff if you want to dig more into my story, or some other stuff that I've been featured on. Or, I'm pretty active on Instagram at Doug Bopst. You can find out more about me there. And I've enjoyed this. I love being able to kind of share my story, and then not only just share it, but maybe articulate it in a way that is relatable to anybody. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, for everybody listening in, I think it's become obvious why I had Doug on. I mean, I preach story to my clients. I tell people, Doug, my story is about being an average kid in an average family. And I often figured out what the hell was my story. I had an average, I had a good life. But the message is clear. You don't need a rock bottom story. You don't need a story of hardship or prison time or whatever, but everybody has one, and your ability to share it more than anybody else is going to do wonders for you. It's going to do wonders for your relationships. It's going to do wonders for your business, because at the end of the day, we have entered an economy where humans buy from humans.
Yeah.
Whether that purchase is a relationship or business, humans buy from humans.
And then one of the things I'll say to follow up is, don't try to spend a bunch of time thinking about like some crazy hardship. If you don't have one, it's okay. Like, not everyone's going to have what I did. I mean,
bingo.
Right. But what you can think about is, what problems have you solved in your story that your audience is facing?
Yep.
And then intertwine parts of your story and how you solve them to help speak into their problems. So that way you literally feel like you're having a conversation with them. Just like I in my mind, it's as crazy as it sounds, after knowing, what Andy does and having a conversation with him before we hopped on, I'm literally trying to speak into the minds of you all and being like, okay, I know his audience. They're probably going to be inspired that if I can, go from being in the depths of despair, incarcerated on felony drug charges, to being where I am today, I can build a big book of insurance business by just hustling, being tenacious, and not giving up on myself.
Yep.
And then some of the other cool tools that I built. And I think once you get over that big fear of the R word, rejection, game over, things change. And one of the things that helped me was being incarcerated when I was in front of a bunch of grown men trying to do a push-up and I couldn't for my knees. I mean, my rejection was pretty high then, right?
Exactly.
But for people who are listening to this, it might just be reaching out to a few people that you've been wanting to reach out to, or connecting with old friends that you have your gut feelings telling you to check on them. Maybe that leads you to a relationship. You never know. And then the last thing I'll say, and then we can wrap up, is just be of service. And it doesn't mean you have to go and build a home for somebody, but just figure out how you can help like one person. Because there's so many people that are struggling right now. Small businesses, as we know it, are struggling. People are struggling. I mean, how can you pay it forward and help other people get better?
Well, and I think it's a very simple finality here, is to get from where you are to where you want to be. Sometimes it's simple as asking.
Yeah.
So, well, Doug, thank you, man. This has been awesome. And I hope you listening in have taken a boatload of notes. This was an amazing story. And you guys know what happens when confidence and clarity collide. Action happens. Go make it happen today.
Cool.
Hey, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. If you're finding bullpen sessions to be valuable to your business and your life, do me a favor. Please go to Apple. Please subscribe. Give it a 5-star rating. And if you have anybody else in your life, whether it's in your personal tribe or in your business, that could also be impacted by listening to these episodes, do me a favor. Share the bullpen sessions with them. I'd be extremely grateful. And until next time, go out, make it happen today. Put a smile on your face and have some fun.